from the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, Thursday, July 18th, 2024. We've got a busy show like always, right? I have yet to find a day where I struggle to find items to talk to all of y'all about. It's just a continuous barrage of challenges that exist for cybersecurity practitioners. Let's break those down on today's show. But before we do that, please make sure to comment, subscribe, like, follow, you name it. Make sure you're sticking around and showing your support on your favorite podcast listening platform and on your favorite social media channels. And now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get the show kicked off with a tradition on this program. To get through so many cybersecurity news in 10 to 15 minutes, one requires a boost, a hyperspeed type of thing. For me, it's caffeine, specifically espresso. And as I travel, because I'm not in my studio, right? This is not my studio. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. Brilliantly delicious, perfectly caffeinated, and just right to get the show going. So let's go ahead and start off with United Healthcare's cost of recovering from the cyber attack on Change Healthcare really hitting what considers to be huge. So on Tuesday, United Healthcare raised its full year outlook for the total impact of the cyber attack from $2.3 billion to $2.45 billion. That's up roughly $1 billion from their previous expectations. The company reported a $4.2 billion profit in the second quarter, down from almost $5.5 billion same time last year, in large part due to costs from the cyber attack, which is shaping up to be one of the worst to ever hit the U.S. healthcare sector. Still, revenue was up almost 7% year over year to $98.9 billion in the quarter. Change, which handles a significant portion of the healthcare industry's billing operation, was hit with a ransomware attack back in February that threw everything into disarray. United Health has paid a $22 million ransom to the criminals that failed to protect the patient data. A lot of that ended up on the dark web. And by the way, I wrote an article on Substack called The Decentralization of Cybercrime and what it really means and what every single executive should know about it. Meaning specifically, when you're hit by a ransomware attack, this isn't one tight-knit group. This is a bunch of affiliates and disassociated. Many of them don't know each other. They're simply sharing resources in order to launch this cyber attack and make some money. And if someone gets greedy, per se, because that money goes to one crypto wallet, it's then distributed to other crypto wallets. And let's say they decide to say, you know what? Yes, you were supposed to get 2.2 million, but we're going to give you 1.2 million. You know why? Because I feel like it and I control it. But then that person also has your data. Then what they're going to do is it's going to be called a double ransom, right? And this double jeopardy ransom essentially means that you're really, whoever you're speaking with, whoever you're negotiating with, whoever the third party provider you are with, you're negotiating with, is really specifically not really negotiating with the head. It's negotiating with the so-called head, but at any point period in time, it's kind of like that episode. There was a few episodes of The Office where Michael and Jim were co-managers, right? But then no decisions were being made. The same applies in cybercrime in many of these cases. The costs of the breach increase, including notification and legal costs. The increase was mostly due to the United Healthcare pausing utilization reviews, prior authorizations, and other checks on provider to keep spending in line in the wake of the Change cyber attack, according to John Rex, CFO at United. As a result of the pause, United Healthcare saw a lingering increase in providers' coding intensity. However, the upcoding anomaly eased after United Healthcare resumed utilization management protocols in mid-April. It took them nearly 6 to 7 weeks to get that back up and running. But in those 6 to 7 weeks, things were really at a parity for them from a billing perspective. And again, this really goes to the impact of cyber attacks on an organization. Almost $2.5 billion is the recovery after they paid a $22 million ransom. So understand, like a good chunk of that, probably 60% of that, I'd say I'd chunk up 50 to 60% to legal costs, right? There's going to be indemnifications, class action lawsuits. We talked about this just on the episode on Tuesday, right? With what we're seeing going on with Progress and Move It. If you're a CISO, if you're a practitioner, this is the type of data that really signifies the change in the role of the CISO, the change of the impact a CISO can have in an organization, and the change of a well-maintained, well-vested cybersecurity program has it. Not to say United didn't have it, but imagine United didn't really have a very mature program. And Change Healthcare didn't, United did, right? United Resources went to help Change Healthcare because Change didn't have all the resources. And this goes to M&As. This goes to acquisitions. This goes to so much of that. When you acquire a company, you assume everything that comes along with it, the mature and the immature alike. And you have to account for the immaturity in that M&A. You've got to get the right people around the table in order to help you understand that immaturity. And as a CISO, you ought to be able to convey that message effectively to the people. And if they don't listen, they don't listen. That's where the buck stops. But you got to CYA, cover your ass, right? Make sure you're properly notifying it. So when events like this happen, really the buck falls on the leadership that didn't listen. And that's big here. Again, $2.45 billion is the impact thus far, and I guarantee you there'll be more adjustments coming. They're kind of doing it quarterly because while revenue's up, the stock prices don't get impacted, etc. But there'll be more to that. Marinemax, which is a self-described world largest recreational boat and yacht retailer, is notifying 123 individuals whose personal information was stolen in a cyber breach back in March claimed by the Riceta ransomware gang. The company operates over 130 locations, including 83 dealerships and 66 marinas and storage facilities worldwide. It reported a $2.4 billion in revenue last year and an $840 million gross profit. The Florida-based yacht seller initially stated in a March 12th SEC filing that no sensitive data was stored on the compromised systems. However, 2 weeks later, it did say that we now know that PII belonging to an undisclosed number of people was taken. On Tuesday, in letters filed with offices of the Maine and Vermont Attorney General, Marinemax revealed that the data breach impacted 123,494 individuals. It added that the incident was detected on March 10th, 10 days after the attackers gained access to networks, and it only impacted a limited number of systems. Nonetheless, driver's license information, social security, passport information, all of that was part of this. Many of that's been leaked online as well. So Marinemax having to deal with that fallout now as well. Let's move to some vulnerabilities here. Ivanti announcing patches for multiple high severity vulnerabilities in their Endpoint Manager and Endpoint Manager for mobile, including a hotfix for an SQL injection flaw. That flaw, CVE 2024-37381, impacts the core server of the Endpoint Manager. EPM 2024 flat. The SQL injection could be exploited by authenticated attackers with network access to execute arbitrary code. Again, they've got to be authenticated, so that really does limit the attack surface there. The hot patch released this week is supported for EPM 2024 flat only. Ivanti intends to release the full security updates that fully address the vulnerability later on Wednesday. The company also released patches for 4 vulnerabilities impacting all versions of their EPMM Endpoint Manager for mobile. 3 out of flaws tracked the CVE 2024-36130, 36131, and 36132 are high severity bugs. The first to allow attackers within the network to execute arbitrary commands on an underlying OS of the appliance, while the third leads to an authentication bypass and sensitive information disclosure. Versions 11.12.0.3, 12.0.0.3, and 12.1.0.1 address these security defects, so you want to make sure you get those patched. Cisco, for their end, also announced software updates for roughly a dozen vulnerabilities, including 2 critical severity bugs in the secure email gateway and smart software manager on-prem. The secure email gateway flaw, CVE 2024-20401, has a CVSS score of 9.8. It's described as an improper handling of email attachments and the content scanning and message filtering functionality of the appliance. To exploit the security defect, all an attacker has to do is send through the affected device an email containing a crafted attachment, which could allow them to replace files on the underlying system. The attacker could then perform any of the following functions, like add users with root privileges, modify the device configuration, execute arbitrary code, or cause a permanent denial of service condition on the affected device. Should the issue be exploited to cause a denial of service, manual intervention would be required to restore the device. Secure email gateway appliances are affected if they're running a vulnerable version of Async OS, have either the file analysis or content filter feature enabled, and use a content scanner tool versions prior to 23.3.0.4823. Content scanner versions 23.3.0.4823, which contains the fix of this for this issue, is included by default in Async OS for secure email software releases 15.5.1-055 and later. So there's those there, as well as the other significant patch here is CVE 2024-20419er. This has a CVSS score of a perfect 10. It's a critical flaw in the authentication system of the Smart Software Manager on-prem, previously Smart Software Manager on SSM satellite. The improper implementation of the password change process could allow a remote unauthenticated attacker to send a crafted HTTP request to an affected device and change the password for any user. So you want to make sure you get these updated ASAP. Atlassian on Tuesday released security-themed updates to fix several high-severity vulnerabilities in its Bamboo, Confluence, and Jira products. The company called urgent attention to the Bamboo data center and server updates that resolve 2 high-severity bugs, including one affecting the URI component builder dependency that could allow an unauthenticated attacker to perform a server-side request forgery (SSRF) attack. CVE 2024-22262. The bug affects Bamboo Data Center and Bamboo Server versions 9.0.0, 9.1.0, 9.2.1, 9.3.0, 9.4.0, 9.5.0, and 9.6.0, and was addressed in versions 9.6.3 LTS and 9.2.14 LTS. The second issue is CVE 2024-21687, a file inclusion flaw that allows an attacker to get the application to display the contents of a local file or execute a different file already stored locally on the server. This also affects all the same versions and addressed with the versions ladder, although 9.6.4 LTS solves this one, and 9.2.16 LTS solves this one as well. A new sophisticated campaign has been discovered targeting individuals involved in the crypto market. The campaign utilizes a multi-stage approach, primarily leveraging the RDPwrapper and Tailscale to facilitate unauthorized access and establish control over a victim system. The attack begins with a zip file containing a shortcut file. Upon execution, the shortcut triggers a PowerShell script download from a remote server, initiating a sequence of actions designed to compromise the victim's system. Notably, the PowerShell script is obfuscated to evade any sort of detection mechanisms. The campaign involves several malicious components, including PowerShell scripts, batch files, Go-based binaries, and exploited targeting a vulnerable driver known as Terminator, aka Spyboy. Although Terminator was not immediately activated during initial infection, its potential use highlights the threat actor's intent to escalate privileges post infection there. According to the Cyber Research and Intelligence Labs, a unique aspect of this campaign is the exploitation of legitimate tools like RDPwrapper and Tailscale, which enable multiple RDP sessions per user, circumventing the default Windows restriction of 1 session per PC. Tailscale is employed by threat actors to establish a secure private network connection. By configuring Tailscale, attackers add the victim's machine as a node on their private network, facilitating remote command execution and data exfil without direct visibility from the conventional network security measures. So you want to make sure you get these TTPs and IOCs over to your security operations team so that they're able to identify what kind of fine-tuning they need to do in the environment in order to identify these types of attacks, or if it's already happened, they'll be able to do that. Again, these are crypto attacks. Weak credentials and misconfigurations across cloud systems were the root of 3 and 4 network intrusions during the first half of this year, Google Cloud said in their latest Threat Horizon report. Google Cloud said systems with weak or no credentials were the top initial access vector, accounting for 47% of cloud environment attacks during the first 6 months of this year. That's a slight decrease from the second half of last year, when weak or no credentials were at the root of 51%. Misconfiguration were the initial access vector for 30% of all cloud environment attacks during the first half of this year, marking a almost 100% jump there from 17% of last year. Poor identity governance. Obviously, I constantly say identity is the new endpoint. I mean it. I know a lot of people don't believe it. I mean it. And you see that with the Snowflake attack. You've seen that with the U.S. healthcare industry, stolen credentials, not having MFA turned on, not properly managing credentials and logins, all play an aspect to this. And in a world where we're in as a service type of environments, that can become critical. And our final story of the day, a threat actor has leaked a database containing the personal information of 442,519 Life 360 customers collected by abusing a flaw in the login API. Known only by their email handler, they said the unsecured API endpoint used to steal the data provided an easy way to verify each impacted user's email, name, and phone number. When attempting to log into a Life 360 account on Android, the login endpoint would return the first name and phone number of the user. This existed only in the API responses, was not visible to the users. If the user had verified their phone number, it would instead be returned as a partial number. According to the threat actor, Life 360 has since fixed the API flaw, and additional requests now return a placeholder phone number. This was first spotted by Hackmanic. The breach behind this data occurred in March of 2024, with Emo saying they weren't behind the incident. On Monday, the same threat actor leaked the 15 million email addresses associated with the Trello accounts that were collected using an unsecured API in January. Again, talked about APIs yesterday on the show. If you haven't seen it, go back. You got to be able to manage your APIs effectively. You got to have visibility from the moment they're written to the moment they're deployed, and then everything thereafter. And if you don't have that, you're playing blind. Right, you might as well be playing football with blindfolds on. It's similar to that, right? Or Messi at the Copa America final, right? Swollen ankle, just hovering around the field, but just wanting to stay in. If you don't have visibility, you're not effective. And the same applies here with your APIs. You've got to have visibility. APIs are becoming more abused more and more every single day. And as practitioners, there are tools out there. There are ways for us to address it. And the risks exist and the ROI is there. You just got to make the case for it. Make sure to tune in Monday, 9 a.m. Eastern, where we'll be back with all the latest and greatest. Tomorrow, we'll be re-airing some really cool highlights of our conversation with Steve Oren, the CTO at Intel Federal, talking about AI. If you missed that, that's a great episode. Go check that out. Until then, have a great rest of your day. And most importantly, y'all, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.